Hello and welcome to episode 10 for this building through the terrain tutorials in the battle games in Middle-earth magazines. This week I'm on magazine number 11 and the subject is standing stones. Now this is going to be a slightly simpler build, I hope. I say that now, knowing me it probably won't be, but a slightly simpler build than the Rohan houses last week, so hopefully a shorter video as well. However, I'm looking forward to doing, as I normally do, two different versions. I'll be doing one that's following pretty closely the instructions that are in the magazine, and then I've got a cool idea for a more advanced build, and that is what might take the time. But anyway, let's get the camera pointed down at the bench, have a look at the magazine and get stuck in. So here we are, the terrain tutorial for the modelling workshop, even for magazine number 11. Making a standing stone. The lands of Middle-earth have endured through many ages, and this step-by-step guide will show you how to create an ancient monument from long ago. Making a weather-worn standing stone is fun, and not as difficult as you might imagine. So, in this PAX modelling workshop, we will be showing you how to make an authentic-looking standing stone to add a touch of realism to your battlefield. The finished result, shown left, has a textured base with small rocky outcroppings and a mossy grass covered that adds to the naturalistic appearance of the model. The main material from which the scenery piece is constructed is a sheet of polystyrene, which is then sanded and painted to create the stone-like effect. All of the various materials and tools needed are detailed below. So what it says you'll need is modelling clippers, PVA glue, sand and gravel, static grass, black and white acrylic paints, an old paintbrush, a junior hacksaw, a ruler, card 1mm thick, a handful of small pebbles, some coarse sandpaper, compressed or XPS, and a felt tip pen. So there we are, as standard, pretty much, the materials, pretty simple, pretty similar to what they normally use. And so yeah, let's get stuck in. I will now gather together some of that stuff and I'll be back for step 1, cutting the block. As you can see, I've got myself a block of green XPS, which is actually quite hard. I've got this because it was just lying around. You can see it's quite knackered up. It's coming from my renovation. And what I've done is I've marked out a rough shape for a standing stone just to cut out of here. So what I'm going to do is going to use my knife. I'm going to cut that out. This is nice and thick. You can see this is 4 centimeters thick. So it's going to give a nice bulky looking appearance. There we are. So, cutting the block. To begin, cut the polystyrene foam into a block that is roughly brick shaped using a junior hacksaw or a standing knife. Ours was approximately 14 centimeters long, but size isn't important, it says, which is interesting. So this one is 15, so there we are, about the same. Making the shape. Mark out the rough shape of the standing stone on your stone with a felt tip pen. The lines will act as your cutting guide. We've also marked areas where large chunks of the stone will be cut out to produce an uneven surface, just like that of a real rock, to help give the impression that the standing stone is very old and sinking to one side on the ground. Cut off the bottom at a rough angle. So let's do some drawing then, shall we? So this is roughly where I want it to be, which I've already started on. And what I'm going to do, it's going to be going along, it's going to be leaning at that angle. So I've got a rough angle there for me to cut along. There we are. And what it's going to do is it's going to be a little bit like this. Okay, and we're going to also cut there. Okay, and we're also going to have a hack a bit out in the middle here. Kind of like that. Right, okay, cutting the stone. With a junior hacksaw, carefully cut away the styrene. This is step 3 already, by the way. We're flying. You have previously marked. It's worth taking your time to make sure you do this safely and accurately. With the sections cut away, the styrene starts to become more contoured and you can already see the shape of the standing stone. Right, so we're going to cut this out now, but I'm going to use my Stanley knife because I find that easier than a junior hacksaw, easier to control and less likely to slip and cause a lot of mess. So being very careful, we'll cut along the bottom and you can see that cuts very easily. This is good stuff, this green foam. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut down this line, but at an angle. And regular viewers of mine will know that I like to do this because there's not much 90 degree in the world. And it just gives a more realistic view. So I'm going to get this carved and I'll be back. Or I'll put some music on, you can watch. There we are. We have hacked and cut, and we have ourselves the shape of a standing stone. Now, sanding the block using some coarse sandpaper to gradually smooth down the edges and sides. The sandpaper will slowly remove layers of the styrene and the block will become more rounded. Take your time and remember to sand the block gently. If you apply too much pressure, there's a good chance the styrene may break in half in your hands. Using sandpaper on styrene like this will create a lot of mess. It is therefore a good idea to cover your work area with newspaper before you start any modelling project. Right, I'm going to get ready and I'll be back very shortly. So now that I've got my newspaper out, I'm going to start sanding the block. And I've got a big block here of a big section of sandpaper, but I find these larger sections to be a little bit unwieldy. So what I'll do is I'll just tear a bit off and just start sanding down. Now the idea of this is just to smooth off these sharp edges, because I've already cut quite a lot of the contours in. So I'll put some music on because this isn't going to sound very nice. See, and you can watch while I do this. There we are. That's horrible. I hate doing that. I'm going to tidy up. I'll be back in a minute. The next step is adding texture. And if you're wondering why you're looking at a bin, it's because I'm going to be doing this directly over my bin so that I can capture all the stuff that falls. What it says is, now that you've cut and sanded the block, it's time to add some texture to the surface of your scenery piece to make it look more realistic. Using the sharp ends of your modelling clippers, beard clipper, yes indeed, gouge out small chunks from the surface of your styrene block to create a pockmarked effect. You can also gently drag the blades of the clippers in a downward motion to give the impression of weathering on the stone's surface. Don't be afraid to cut lots of chunks. The more craggy, eroded and weather beaten it looks, the better. Just like a real ancient standing stone. So let's get stuck in. So we're just going to snip bits out, it seems, and drop it straight in the bin. There we are, that looks quite beaten up, doesn't it? So that's going to be that step done. So I'm going to quickly tidy up and I'll be back for step 6. We are absolutely flying. So to step 6, your standing stone is now ready to be based. Cut an oval shape out of your card. Make sure it's big enough to be able to support the standing stone. Using neat PVA glue, stick the styrene onto the card. Leave the glue to set for at least 2 hours before carrying on. So it looks like we've finally reached the end of this opening burst that's only taken me about 20 minutes or so to get here, including filming time. So this is a super quick build. So what I've got here is I've got some cardboard, which I will now make into an oval. There we are. So I can probably get away with a bit smaller. And I'll cut the corners off this and that'll make it into a nice oval. There we are. And here we have my standing stone and we are going to stick it on about yay. So let's get some PVA in my useful pot. And down it goes. And I will now leave that for a little while and I'll be back later when it's dry for the next steps. I hope you're enjoying this. I really am. It's nice to be doing something really simple. No sooner do I say how nice it is to do something simpler than we come to my more advanced build. So what you see in front of you are 4 MDF bases that are A5 sized. And what I'm going to be doing here is, where I've done a solo standing stone, I'm going to be doing something not quite Stonehenge because that is humongous, but a stone circle. That's my idea here. So it will be done in 4 sections that will be able to be tiled in any way they want. So roughly you will have the you'll have a circle of stones that will be across all of the 4 areas, but you'll be able to put just 1 in or just 2 in or whatever if you want to make it a bit more flexible, because I don't want this to be too monolithic, but I do want it to look really cool when they're all together. So what I'm going to do, and I won't do all of this on camera because a lot of it will be repeating the steps you saw for the standard build, I'm going to make myself quite a number of stones out of the foam. So some are going to be quite, they're not going to be as big as that one, some of them are going to be quite large and look, they're going to be for standing up, and some of them will be for lying down, and then we will move on from there. So I will go away now and construct a ton of stones, and I'll be back when I'm ready to start sticking them onto this base so that we can see where they're going to go. There we are, that was a lot of cutting, including my thumb, which is something you need to be very careful of when you're working with this stuff. So what I'm going to do now is, I probably won't do all this on camera either, but I will do this, this section here. I have two uprights and I have a cross piece, which I'm going to glue together and stick down like so, and then I've got a shorter piece here which is going to kind of tuck in there. So the way I'm going to work this is, first of all, I'm going to glue the cross piece to the base, to the upright, and then I'm going to glue the uprights to the bottom, I think. No, I think actually I'm going to glue the uprights in place first, and then later on I will glue the cross piece. So that will be done using PVA, because it's what we use, isn't it? And so we'll just stick that there. Find a rough location for the other one, stick that there, there we are, and then a bit of PVA on the top of each one, and settle that on there, and finally, if I don't trash the joint, a couple of cocktail sticks to go through the top and hold it in place, like so. And I'll snip that off when it's all dried. There we are. So that will now glue in nicely, hopefully. And last but not least, on this section, I will glue down this one with a smear of PVA. And there we are. So I will go around and arrange the rest of the circle, and I'll be back when that is done, and we'll be at the same stage for both the standard one, which is drying over in that direction, and this more advanced one. Next up on the advanced build, I'm going to be making use of some Luke's APS's modelling compound to build a little bit of terrain interest, a little bit of variation in these very, very flat bases. Now I don't always do this, but on this one particularly I want to, because I want some of these to be partially buried, and then I'll be able to go in and do the painting, etc., all of one, which will be the next step. So I've done this on the channel before. I won't film the whole thing because it will be very repetitive, but I will give you a once over with some of my best tips, because I've been using this now for a little while and there are some things that I get wrong all the time. So the first thing, or I used to get wrong all the time, the first thing is, don't mix very much up. It does dry quickly, which is superb. It does give you quite a good long working time, but if you mix too much up in your pot, then you'll be racing to put it down onto your board, and you may even end up with it just drying out and it not being very good. Now I do mix it quite thick, as I've said in the past, so it could be that if I mixed it thinner I wouldn't have so much of an issue, but then I wouldn't get it at the consistency at which I like to work with it. So I suppose it is in one sense a personal thing. If you want very, very thin, sloppy Luke's APS, who doesn't, then you maybe can mix up a larger batch and have it stay slightly more workable for longer. But for me, I don't like it to be too liquid, because I find that it's just more difficult for me to shape and do what I want to do with it. So I mix up a very, very small amount, and that was half one of those little beakers of mixing of the powder, and then a little splash of water. The other thing is, add water very slowly. Even there I've probably just dropped a little bit too much water in that second addition, and so for me that is a little bit too wet. So what I'll do is I'll just get a pinch more, mix it in, and that will thicken it slightly to the consistency I want. So just be cautious adding your water, particularly if you don't want to make too large a batch, because otherwise you'll end up adding more and more of the mix, and then ending up with a larger and larger batch, which then is harder and harder to work with. Anyway, that's maybe slightly wetter than I normally have it, but it's pretty close. I don't like it to be any more loose than that. What we then do is we literally, and I'll put it onto this one that's right in front of me, we literally blob it on. And don't worry too much at the first stage about getting it smooth. What you're doing at the moment is building up the rough shape that you're looking for. We'll do the smoothing step in a second when we've got it all onto the table, all onto the board, hopefully not on the table. And all I'm doing here, I'm going to put this over pretty much most of the base. All we're doing here is we're looking at adding some interest, because it was very flat before, and the world is neither flat nor monochrome. So, like I don't use only one colour of flock, I try not to do one level if I can help it. Bear in mind these are supposed to be old stones, so they are likely to have built up accretion of the soil around their base and what have you. So I'll put some music on and apply the rest of this, and I'll start talking again when there's something else to add. Okay, that's all been applied. I'm now going to wash my hands, and I will be back in 1 second. So as you can see, it is a gloriously messy process. The next step is to smooth it down. And what I do here is I have my little pot of water that I use for mixing, and I can wet a finger, and I'll start where I started. And this is where you actually apply the smoothness or the roughness. Make sure that you've got the actual contours that you're looking for, the exact contours, because when you're applying it and it's very wet, it's basically, it sticks to you too much. So you're just going to pick it up and pick it up if you try to do something this accurate. But once it's had that 5 minutes to go off, no more than 5 minutes it took me to apply all of that, it becomes much easier for you to come across and just smooth it over with your finger like so. And that takes away some of the more obvious lumps and bumps that are out of scale and maybe not what you're looking for. I mean, if they are what you're looking for, then leave them in. Why not? You know, it's your model. But for me, I want this to be a little more graded and less lumpy in terms of pointy lumps. So there we are, simple as that. And then if your finger's drying out, just dip it again, and then that gives you a little bit more working time. And that's it. That's how you do it. So you use Luke's APS modelling compound, and it is superb. I love it. I think that of all the stuff that he produces, I think this is my favourite thing. Everything else is pretty good, but the same as everything else. But this works so well. It really does work well. So I'm going to get on with the rest of these little boards, and I'll be back later on once this is dried, and I'm on to the next step. There we are, that's done. Total time, including washing hands, less than 10 minutes for that board. Back to the official version, and we're on step 6 still, which was gluing this to the base. And then the next step is using neat PVA, take some small pebbles and stick them around the base of the styrene stone. These smaller stones will add realism and help to break up the edges of the model's base. Lastly, use a large paintbrush to paint PVA glue all over the cardboard base and then cover it with a mix of sand and gravel. You can also paint the glue onto areas of the styrene to stick stand onto it. This adds even more texture. So then leave that to dry overnight, and remember to clean your brush thoroughly after using PVA, which is very good advice. So let's get these 2 steps done, which actually are pretty much what I do anyway, which is pretty cool. It's nice to see my techniques coming and being used in this. So first of all, we have my neat PVA, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to glob this on in places over the base as it suggests. And what you can see next to the base at the back of the shot is a bucket that says Builder's Sand number 4. And what that is the largest, here we are, the largest stones that come out when I am sifting my my sand. So when I get 4 grades of sand when I'm preparing my basing sand, and this is the largest one. And so what we'll do is we will literally just scatter them on while holding it over the bucket, and they will stick on. And if I decide I want more, I can put some more PVA, but there we are. That's how simple that is. It's a really simple technique. Let's put some more on actually, I think. So we'll just get some more PVA around the base, as it suggests, and put some more in here. And again, just handfuls of the stones and drop them on. I like to call this an agricultural method of hobbying. There we are. So that'll do. Tap them down. We now have a nicely textured base with quite large stones on it. What I'll now do is get my watered down PVA, and we will do the next step, for which we will not use size 4, but we will use sizes 1, 2 and 3. I'll be back in a second. Okay, so here we are. I have my sand. I have Builder's Sand number 2 and I have Builder's Sand number 3. And I have my watered down terrain paint. A link for making this is in the description below. But basically I will just mix that a little bit better than it is now, take a little bit more PVA in the water, and then paint that on as it suggests, all over the base. Getting rid of some of that gunk which has come off my brush somehow. And then once I've painted it on in a little place, I'll do a bit of scattering, and then I'll do the next bit and the next bit. So I'll do it in sections. That's how I like to do this. And I will actually paint it all over the top of the other larger stones that have just been put in as well. There we are. So there's a bit. So first of all, Builder's Sand number 2. Not much of this because it's still quite large. There we are. And then finally Builder's Sand, sorry, that was number 3. And finally Builder's Sand number 2, which will scatter all over and then empty off. And there we are. You can see just how easy that is to do. I'll bring that forward actually for 1 second for the next one so you can see it a little bit easier. So we'll paint on. And I may actually not bother with Builder's Sand number 3. It's so close to the largest size that it's a little bit pointless. There we are. So a bit of glue, PVA glue, watered down. There we are. And then let's build the Builder's Sand number 2 forwards. Got a little pot and I'll sprinkle it on. Simple as that. There we are. Some good texture there. Good. Right, I will carry on with that for the rest of this, and I'll be back in a minute when I've finished doing that and I'm about to texture the stone. There, that's done. So as it says, you can also paint the glue onto areas of the styrene to stick sand onto it, which we'll do because I think that's quite nice, and I've not actually tried that technique before, and that's exciting for me. So I'm just going to put some paint on the styrene. It's unusual for me to work with styrene that isn't painted yet at this stage. Normally by this stage I will have applied colour to it. But anyway, so we'll put some PVA on there, and then using the same grade of gravel, we'll scatter that over. This is going to get more and more difficult to do as it gets more and more covered in sand. So it might be that I have to wait a little while for the next application after this one to actually be able to hold the thing. Though I suppose, because I've got this on a base, I could lift it with the base over the top of the sand, like so, and hold it right in and scatter like that. There we are, that works, kind of. Right, I'm going to do the rest of this, and then I will leave this to dry overnight as it suggests, and I'll be back tomorrow with the next step. Now for these. Now these are going to take a little longer. They're going to use a little more complicated steps. First of all, and as I think I said in the previous clip, I don't normally work with the XPS completely untreated. So what I'm going to do now is paint every single area of XPS which is exposed, not worrying about getting the ground around it a little covered or dripping or whatever, because I'm going to be adding more paint to that. But I'm mainly worrying about covering all of the XPS in solid black. This is a terrain paint black, so it's got mixed with water, and it's also got PVA in it. That allows it to be a little more of a solid covering. The PVA works with it better. Oh, there's a little bit come off, never mind, I'll take that out. So yeah, so I'm going to now paint the entirety of every single stone in black, and then that will allow me to do the next step, which is going to be the basing around each of the stones. So I will get that done, which won't take long as you can see, but I won't bore you by running the camera for the whole thing, because it's just this for every stone. Try not to drip if I can help it, but it doesn't matter, like I say, if I do. And the idea will be is to move it around a bit like this, so you can see it from different angles, so you can spot the inevitable misses. Right, I'll get the other stones done, and I'll be back for the next step in a bit. And so to step 7 on this one, which is called the undercoat. Paint the entire model with your black paint. Once this undercoat is dried, you can go back and touch up any areas that you missed the first time. Very wise. Don't use a spray to undercoat any polystyrene, compressed or otherwise. The chemicals in the spray will react with the styrene and cause it to warp and melt. This will ruin your model. Okay, a couple of things to say about that. It's not actually it is the chemicals, it's the propellant which does the melting. So if you spray from far enough away, you can of course spray onto polystyrene, and I've done it. The second thing to say is sometimes that melting can be really cool and can work quite well for your advantage. So yeah, just be cautious. It also says to use a large old brush, such as you see here, because it will ruin a new brush, so don't do a new brush, which is very, very correct. Always wash immediately as well. And it says paint with a big brush because you want to paint it faster, which is pretty obvious, but I suppose, yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some black paint, and we're going to paint it all over. Now this is my terrain paint, which is water as well as paint and PVA, and so it actually will provide more adhesion or more coverage than just normal black paint. So hopefully we won't have to go back and do a second coat, but if we do, we will. So I'll get the rest of this painted, as you can see, blobbing it on in a kind of dramatic fashion. I will paint the upright first because I want to be able to hold it, and if I've got paint on that will be really annoying. There we are. So I'll get this painted, and I'll be back when it's done to show you the next step. Getting inside those little holes with a big brush isn't as clever as maybe they thought they were being. I'll probably be going back in there with a small brush to get the bits that this brush won't dig into. Right, onwards. I'll be back in a bit. So the next step with these builds is to put the colour onto the stone, which I put on black yesterday. So that's going to be done with a heavy overbrush, which is not a dry brush, of the darker grey, which wants to basically colour the stone. As you can see, it is not a dry brush. You are looking at getting the stone to be dark grey, leaving the deepest recesses to still show the dark and the black. After I've done this, I will then pull out my colours, and I will put lots and lots of different colours onto the rocks, because rocks are definitely not just grey. They're green, they're blue, they're purple, they're red, they're orange, they're all sorts of colours. Sometimes they're grey, but most of the time they're not. And one of the things I would think is that for a standing stones, you're going to find that either you're going to have a very black rock, because that is what they wanted to have, or you're going to have something which has even more interesting colours in it. And I was tempted for a while to just leave it quite black, but I think my other standing stone is going to be like that. It's going to be quite a dark colour, and so I think this one I'm going to go for it being more of an interesting coloured rock that they've picked to make their sacred circle out of. So I will stop muttering and rambling, and I'll get the rest of this done in this grey, then gather together my other paints and show you how that's going to look as well. But I will stop the camera, because as I say, I'm going to do all of the rocks at the same time, but I'll only show you how I do this one, because all the others will be using the same technique. So it's such a simple technique. So that's that done. The first coat of the grey. I will now do the others, and I'll bring you back when I'm going to do the next step on this particular tile. It is amazing to me just how much of a difference maybe even only that makes to what the rocks look like when you are doing this. However, we're going to make them look even more amazing. So because these are, as I said, they're holy rocks, I'm going to make them look quite interesting. So I've got some purple here, when I can get it open without exploding it. There we are, that's open now, which I'm going to dry brush over this time. I'm not going to heavy overbrush. So I've got my cloth here, and I've got my brush. And what I do is I always go to the lid, because you're less likely to knock the lid over, and if you do, it's not as much likely to cause a trouble. So we're going to come in here and we're going to dry brush in areas with the purple, just to bring it out a little bit, make it interesting. If you have your brush slightly overloaded, then just dry brush less pressure when you're pushing onto the rock. So that's going to be the first colour, is purple. And you can see how quick it is to do this. That's done. Okay, so I will now go and do the other rocks, and I'll be back for the orange when I've done them. So the purple's on and looking marvellous, I may say, and now I'm going to go for a really brave choice. Brave. Scary. Bright orange, luminous orange, very, very bright. So this does want to be quite a light dry brush. But hopefully what it will do is it will really make the rock sparkle. That's the idea, to make it really stand out and look odd. Purple and orange, huh? I don't think they're in the correct parts of the colour. And will probably shout at me for that combination. But hey, nature's crazy. And these are potentially magic rocks, or at least so the people who put them up thought. And it's going to look superb with a bit of a kind of like contrast like this going on. So yeah, I will do this to all of them. and then I think I'll be ready for the basing. Flying, cracking on with this. Yeah, that's looking really nice. Really starting to pop these rocks. There we are. Right, so that's that done. I'll do the others and I'll be back very shortly. I'm happy with the colour of those rocks. So what I'm going to do now is my traditional paint and sand mix. And I'll need to have a brush, so I'll grab one of them. This is something I do on almost every build. So you'll have seen this a lot. If you've watched any of my videos, you'll have seen this before, but I will just quickly show you on this one and then I'll do the rest. The way we do it is we have my terrain paint, and I'm going for the slightly redder terrain paint on this one. We paint it on quite thick, particularly if you're using Luke's APS's modelling compound. That stuff is thirsty and dries fast, as you can see. It's drying. So we paint it on thick and we get some sand and we cover it over as quick as we can, because like I say, Luke's APS modelling compound is uber thirsty and soaks your water up very hungrily, which is why I always water this paint mix down so that it has a chance to stay wet. So we'll do this in very small sections. There we are. Done. And then when that's done, I'm going to empty that back into the bucket, just as quick as that. Okay, and there you are. That's done. So I'll do the rest of this one, and I'll do the rest of the other boards, and then that'll be me for these clips. And what I'll probably do then is, when this is dried, I'll paint another coat of this reddy brown over the top, so I get the colour I'm looking for, and then we'll be ready for flocking on these boards. But yeah, there we are. Lots of progress. So we are on to step 8, and I apologise, this is going to be a relatively short clip, and there may be drilling because my builders are working away fitting a toilet. So step 8, painting the standing stone grey. Mix 1 part black with 2 parts white paint to make a grey colour. Dry brush the grey all over the stone. When this is dry, and the base. Once the paint is dried, mix up another grey colour, this time adding more white to the mix for a lighter shade. Okay, so what it's saying there is basically we're going to do the technique that I used, that you've already seen on the other one, where we're going to do 2 shades of grey and we're going to just highlight it up. So I'm going to make use of the pots that I have bought rather than mixing, just because it's easier for me and it's what I do. So I have my darker grey here, which I'll put over most of it as a slightly heavier dry brush, and then I have a lighter grey here that I'll do a proper dry brush once that's dried. So let's get that done. I'll pop some music on and you can watch. So there we are. Apologies for the early part of the clip not being particularly in shot. That's how quick that is. I've just done that live, and what we'll now do is clean off my brush and do the lighter dry brush. So that's how quick it is to dry. I literally have just gone over, dried the brush, I'll wash the brush, and I'm going to dry it off, apply it as a proper dry brush. So as traditional, make use of the back of your hand. And this is going to be looking at picking out very much the top highlight, very much not a heavy brush, just to add a little bit more interest in very few places, and then a little bit on the ground as well, but not very much, because most of the ground is going to be covered over with flock, and so we're just going to pick out a few of these areas where we're not going to flock potentially. There we are. do for now. That's looking rather nice. A little bit more around here, that's where I'm probably going to leave it and not flock it so much, probably on those stones there and there. But I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so now we're going to go to finishing off. Your standing stone is almost complete. This is step 9. Paint PVA glue over the sand base and cover the glue with static grass. Leave it to dry for about 2 hours. Afterwards, shake any surplus grass off the model. You can also use glue to stick small clumps of static grass onto the standing stone to create the effect of grass and moss growing on it. So what I'll do is I'll gather my stuff together. I will probably use static grass and also my sand my paint and sand mix, which I use to make scatter, and we will do that step on this and also on the other more advanced builds, and then we'll be done. So I'll be back very shortly. Again, apologies for any banging and drilling that's going on in the background like there is now. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to paint on my PVA mix, which is, you can find out about, there's a link below. It is basically PVA with water and a little dash of washing up liquid in it, just to act as a fluid improver and also to make sure it never goes off. Because one of the things with these types of things is if they sit in a drawer for a long time or they don't get used for a while, then they can get mouldy, because your tap water is not as pure as you might like to think. Anyway, on that cheerful note, I will quickly show you how I do this on this section, and then I will continue and finish off this build and also all of these using the array of materials that you see in front of you. And let me just quickly talk you through these. So these 4 big buckets, they contain scatter that I've made myself out of sawdust with paint mixed in. And my technique there is to use a little bit of dark and then drop some different colours on, and then come back and tie it all together with dark. And anyone who's watched any of my videos will have seen me do this over and over again. I have roughly the same technique all the time. And one thing to say here, I'm very keen on pointing out, is that grass is not all the same colour, it never is. And so don't make the mistake of only dropping one type of grass on, because otherwise it won't look very natural, it will look very artificial. That's why I have 4 different colours that I pick from and scatter from. So I do it in small sections. Normally I'll only use 3 colours in any one area, but you can do whatever you wish. Of course, it's your model. But this is how I do it, just with a tiny pinch and then a little kind of scattering motion, and do it very, very gently. Now on this one I'm leaving some of the rocks to stick out, as you can see. There we are, and we'll get some of this colour as well. So I'll actually put 4 on here. I'm not going to use the static grasses which I have over in this corner, because I'll do them probably after this has dried, using the proper static grass glue and pick out some of the areas. So that's how I do it. I will get on with the rest of this and I will be back to show you how it looks when it's done, and maybe when it's a little quieter in the house. Here we are at the end of the build, and I am particularly pleased with this. So I did 2 builds, as is traditional, and in this clip I'm going to show you the official one, and then I'll come back and I'll set up the other one that I did, which is a bit more advanced. However, I am so pleased with how this official one looks. I shouldn't be surprised now, because every time I've followed the instructions to the letter, pretty much, it's been a brilliant outcome, and this is no different. So I would encourage you to follow to the letter, because you just get a good result. The suggestions they make are brilliant. The pulling out of pot marks, it makes it look really aged. The adding of the actual gravel to the face of the rock works really well, and yeah, it's just a fantastic, interesting item, and it will look really good on the tabletop, and I'm very, very pleased with it. So that's the official build. I will now get together the unofficial beard version, and I'll be back very shortly. And here we are with my version, which is a stone circle, and this I am also very, very pleased with. I particularly like the bold choice I made of the orange and purple. I think it really makes these rocks pop pop and makes them look like there's something a lot about them, maybe something a bit special, and you can see why whoever made this stone circle chose to make it out of this rock, and that tells a story, and I really like telling stories with the builds and with my terrain. I think it's much more interesting to be able to say, look, this is a bit interesting, you can dig into this, you can maybe imagine something around it. So I've made this as tiling, so each of these tiles can be moved around and positioned wherever they want, or it can be put as a larger part of a larger and spread out with other terrain in the middle or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm very pleased with it. The redder colour of the ground I like, as well as a little bit of a contrast with the green, and I've done it nice and sparse. I'm just pleased with the general look of it. So there we are, those are the builds I've done. It's been a good build. I will now turn the camera around and finish this video off. So there we are. Another Battle Games in Middle-earth magazine build is done, and more awesome terrain goes on my shelves, which will be used in future games, and potentially, if I manage to get around to some shooting some proper videos of me playing, you'll see them in the future. So yeah, I've been very much impressed with this build this week. It's been quick. It has only taken me a week to do this, so I've actually got a little bit of time. I'm waiting for supplies for the next build, which is frustrating. I could have stuck straight into it, but I need to wait. But yeah, it's been good to get something that's a little easier than some of the previous builds that I've done that have taken me way longer, and I've been editing even the day before I've been trying to publish, so that's a little bit of stress. And this has been a nice, relaxing, chilled out build, and it's going to look great on the tabletop. And if you have built along, I'm sure that you will also find that it looks great on your tabletop, because the techniques used in this week's are really simple but really effective. If you are going to use it, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. It's always great to hear comments on my videos. I just love it, and I always reply. So yeah, drop a comment below, and if it's inspired you to do something of your own, let me know that as well. If you're not yet subscribed, please do so, and don't forget to ding the bell, because if you ding that bell, then YouTube will tell you whenever one of my videos goes live. And I will wrap this video up by saying, as I normally do, always do, thank you so much for watching Beard Clipper. And please stay healthy, stay safe, and stay well at this crazy, crazy time we're living through.